1 or 2 further sleet and snow showers coming through. They'll eventually die away, and then for most it's a fine afternoon. Plenty of bright winter sunshine, but feeling cold, particularly in the wind in the north and the east. The wind eases and slowly changes direction during Thursday night, but we keep the clear skies, and under those clear skies, widely once again, frosty conditions forming. The most widespread and penetrating frost, this time in the south and the east, with temperatures in some rural parts below -4 or -5 degrees. The coldest night of the year so far in some southern parts of the country. But elsewhere, cloud is starting to filter in from the Atlantic, and those cloudier skies in the northwest will keep things frost-free. And that cloud will become a bit more widespread through the weekend, I think. So less sunshine, fewer frosts and fog patches at night, but staying cold.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is Dewbs & Co, the show where we'll get into everything that has got you talking today. And okay, I've caved. I'll finally talk about everything that's going on in relation to Boris Johnson, because it's been a busy day in the land of politics, hasn't it? The ungratefuls, i.e. many of the 2019 intake, have shown precisely zero loyalty to the only reason why they have a job, and they've been busy filing their letters of no confidence in Boris. And in the ultimate show of hypocrisy, MP Christian Wick, no, I didn't know who he was either, but for clarity, he's an MP who co-sponsored a bill demanding any defection should result in a by-election. Well, he decided today to defect to the Labour Party without a by-election. Awkward. Meanwhile, Boris remains, but for how much longer? And by the way, if he goes, where? It's going to Also, I'm very happy today because Plan B restrictions in England are about to be lifted. Yes! But do you share my happiness? Or would you prefer them to remain? And UK inflation jumps to its highest level in 30 years. Is it time for the government to intervene? That is, of course, assuming they can find 5 minutes between their infighting. Anyway, all of that to come and more, but back to the latest news headlines.
Hello, I'm Tamsin Roberts in the GB newsroom. The Health Secretary says the Omicron variant is in retreat as he confirmed plans to lift Plan B restrictions in England next week. At a COVID briefing this evening, Sajid Javid said the guidance to work from home will end immediately. Face masks will also no longer be mandatory in classrooms from tomorrow, and they won't be required in public places from next Thursday. The Health Secretary says the latest data shows previous measures had a positive impact.
This plan has worked, and the data shows that Omicron is in retreat. Today's ONS data shows a fall in infections, including in older age groups. Hospitalizations have also fallen over the past week, and the number of patients, COVID patients, in intensive care beds is now at the same level as it was back in July.
The MP for Bury South has defected from the Conservatives to the Labour Party. Christian Wakeford says his former party is trying to defend the indefensible and doing so gladly over what he calls far too many issues. The Prime Minister claims the Tories will regain the seat at the next election. Speaking on GB News, Conservative MP Michael Fabricant called on the new Labour MP to call a by-election.
Well, I have to laugh, by the way, about Christian Wakeford, who has defected across the Labour because he was a co-sponsor of a bill in Parliament which said that if anyone crosses the floor of the House, they should call an immediate by-election.
Is that right?
So I challenge Christian Wakeford. That's what you were saying only a few months ago. Will you now call that by-election that you wanted to make law in your bill? We'll see.
Meanwhile, Number 10 says Boris Johnson expects to lead the Tories in the next general election and will fight any vote of no confidence launched against him. A vote could be triggered if 54 letters are submitted by Conservative MPs to the 1922 committee. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer insists the Downing Street party fallout means the PM's now too distracted.
While Labour was setting out plans to heat homes, he was buying a fridge to keep the party wine chilled. While we were setting out plans to keep bills down, he was planning parties. And while we were setting out plans to save jobs in the steel industry, he was trying to save just one job, his own.
Well, the Prime Minister believes his government defended his position.
When the history of this pandemic comes to be written, and the history of the Labour Party comes to be written, and believe me, they are history and will remain history, Mr. Speaker, it will show that we delivered while they dithered, and we vaccinated while they vacillated, Mr. Speaker.
The cost of living has risen at the fastest pace in 30 years as inflation rose to 5.4% in December. That's up from 5.1% the month before. The price of food, non-alcoholic drinks, hospitality and clothing went up. That rise was partially offset by declining prices of transport and recreation. A 14-year-old boy has become one of the youngest Britons to be convicted of a terror offence. The teenager from Darlington, who can't be named because of his age, admitted 3 counts of possessing extremist right-wing material at Westminster Magistrates Court. The boy is due to be sentenced in April. UK crime-fighting groups have travelled to Spain to track down the 12 most wanted fugitives. The National Crime Agency is leading an international campaign to find the offenders. The dozen men are wanted for crimes including murder, drugs and weapons trafficking. GB News Home and Security Editor Mark White has the details.
Well, this is a major campaign right across Spain and, of course, in the UK, where these 12 most wanted fugitives are a mix of murder suspects, drug traffickers and gun runners. The National Crime Agency say that by now it's likely that those fugitives will have tried to integrate into the British expat communities across Spain.
British Airways has joined Emirates and Air India in cancelling a number of US flights over 5G safety concerns. It follows fears that transmissions from signal towers near US airports could disrupt planes' navigation systems. BA cancelled flights from Heathrow to Boston, Chicago, Los Angeles, New York and San Francisco. The airline says it will continue to review its schedule and apologise to customers for the disruption. This is GB News on TV, online and DAB+ radio. Now, though, it's back to Dewbs & Co.
Thanks for that. Well, keeping me company until 7 o'clock. My panel, Claire Pearsall, the former Special Advisor to the Home Office, Nigel Nelson, political editor for Sunday People, and Sophie Corcoran, who's a political commentator. I also found out earlier today, I mean, I've got to admit, I'm the last to know everything, it seems, but 2 of my panel are married. I'll let you try and work out which 2. And you know the drill about Dewbs & Co. It's not just about us on this show, it's also about you at home and your thoughts. You can get in touch with me on email, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me at Michelle Dewbs or at GBNews. I finally relented and decided to focus on the Boris Johnson topic. I also put a poll up on my Twitter account earlier on this afternoon asking, what do you think? Do you reckon Boris Johnson should stay, or do you think he should go? I'll be honest, right now, by quite a margin, people are saying he should stay. So let me know your thoughts as we go through the programme. And today, of course, was PMQs, and in the Commons, Boris faced fresh pressure to resign. The charge, of course, being led by the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer.
If the Prime Minister misleads Parliament, should they resign?
Mr. Speaker, let's be absolutely clear. The Right Honourable Gentleman is continuing to ask a series of questions which he knows will be fully addressed by the inquiry. He is wasting this House's time. He's wasting the people's time, Mr. Speaker. He continues to be completely irrelevant, Mr. Speaker, because we have an inquiry. We have an inquiry, Mr. Speaker, and I'm not going to anticipate that inquiry any further.
But it didn't stop there. Calls for resignation also came from the SNP leader in the Commons, Ian Blackford, and then Tory stalwart David Davis.
What a look! What a look! The Prime Minister laughing once again, laughing at the British public. The Prime Minister is taking the public for fools. Nobody believes him. Will the Prime Minister finally take responsibility? Resign. Go, Prime Minister.
But I expect my leaders to shoulder the responsibility for the actions they take. Yesterday, he did the opposite of that. So I'll remind him of a quotation altogether too familiar to him of Leo Amery to Neville Chamberlain. You have sat there too long for all the good you have done. In the name of God, go.
Well, no messing around there, and more drama followed when former Tory MP Christian Wakeford, one of the so-called Red Wall MPs, left the Tories and crossed the floor to join the Labour Party. There he is in his union flag mask there, sitting behind Keir Starmer, for those of you, got to be honest, me included, who had no idea who he was before today. Now, one person who's been right across this story since dawn this morning is our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, who's at College Green in Westminster. Darren, good evening to you.
Hello, Michelle. Yeah, dawn to dusk. Pretty cold
here. Oh, well, you're a hard-working man, I can tell you. Tell us the latest.
Well, so the latest is, having gone from kind of feverish free-while kind of mood yesterday, in which there was lots of talk about letters going into Graham Brady, a lot of expectation on Prime Minister's question time, and as you've rightly pointed out, that defection and David Davis's intervention. We've now kind of somewhat, I think, find ourselves back in a lull. Again, a bit of a rollercoaster ride here at Westminster, and I think there is a sense, first of all, that Boris Johnson is very deliberate change of tactic at Prime Minister's question time, which was to be quite bullish, to essentially not to be apologetic, not really to answer questions that Keir Starmer wanted them to. Didn't do a bad job of that. And in addition, the defection in some ways I think has played into Boris Johnson's hands. Now that might seem a little odd that you lose an MP and yet he might appear stronger, Boris Johnson, but I think in essence it means that many Conservative MPs who may well have been on the verge of sending a letter in to try and spark a leadership race now view this as kind of a bit of a tribal kind of aspect to it, that they are viewing that MP as a bit of a traitor, not just to the Prime Minister but to the party at large. And I think it's kind of calmed things down a little bit. That is not to say, though, Michelle, that the Prime Minister is somehow off the hook or that there is not enormous pressure on him. There clearly is. The real big moment will come when Sue Gray reports, when her investigation concludes, the expectation is now that that will be next week rather than in the next couple of days.
Yeah, Darren, one of the things that I found quite fascinating was we talk about that defection a second ago. This was Christian Wakefield was an MP, actually, that signed, well, I think he was one of the co-supporters of a bill which basically was arguing for a change to the rules. So in the case of a defection, that a by-election was essentially forced through. Now, I know he doesn't have to do that, but what do you think? Do you think we'll see any likelihood of him basically not being a hypocrite and following through with what he wanted to see happen, which was a by-election, recall petition and a by-election? Do you think that might happen?
I think in one word, no, not least of all because the Labour Party spokesperson today was giving the impression that that was not going to happen. I don't think he's terribly keen to happen either. You're right, though, people will, and already have accused him of hypocrisy. He's someone who has previously in the past said that essentially if you cross the floor of the House, which he literally did today, if you switch parties, that in the end you should face the electorate, because not only are you elected as a person, but many people feel that you're elected on behalf of your party as well. And it's really quite difficult, actually, for Christian Wakefield, in the sense that he's got a whole backlog of attacks on the Labour Party. The Labour Party he is now a member of. He's laid into how they've let down the people of Bury South in the past. He's laid into Keir Starmer and his leadership. He's attacked many of Labour Party policies. And supported, of course, the Conservative Party. And people will be going through his social media, going through public statements and speeches he's made. And believe me, I think they will be chucked in his face in the days and weeks to come. As for the man himself, he argues that in the end, he just did not find a home in the Conservative Party, that he's a centrist politician, and that he's quite excited by Sir Keir Starmer's plans for the Labour Party.
And finally, in a word, Darren, in your view, Boris Johnson, safe for the moment?
For the moment, so difficult, though. I mean, we do not know if there's going to be more allegations, more evidence potentially against the Prime Minister in the days to come. Does Dominic Cummings, for example, have something else up his sleeve? And it will come down to Sue Gray, just how harsh she is on the Prime Minister. My final thought on all of this, even if actually her report doesn't really cast much judgment, what it will do is it will lay out the series of parties in Downing Street and government over 2020. And when people look back and look at the scale of it, I think that could be quite troubling for the Prime Minister.
Darren McCaffrey, thank you very much for your update. Now, Nigel Nelson, I want to start with you. Before I start with you, I want to get it off my chest how I feel at the moment, because I actually feel a little bit depressed. This is my first time working in the media. I don't have a background of being a political journalist or anything like that. So this is all very new to me, this whole kind of situation. And I found it, I've been trying to articulate the words, find the words to articulate how I feel. I find it quite depressing, what's happening at the moment. I find it quite grubby, what's going on in the House of Parliament. I find it so much hypocrisy going on left, right and centre. And I am pretty much reminded of the reason why I was entirely disengaged with politics right up until the age of 30. I never even bothered voting because I felt everyone was all the same. I didn't particularly trust anyone. I didn't like lots of the goings on, and I was completely detached. And I almost feel, and this is horrible to admit given the job I do, but if there was a general election tomorrow, I don't even think I'd go out and bother voting.
Well, if you don't vote, then go in and spoil your ballot paper, because the important thing is to show that you care enough to actually go to the polling station.
But at the moment, I don't think I do.
Well, I mean, the trouble is, if you do that, nothing ever changes. That the most important right we have is to vote. So if, in a sense, not voting is a way of protesting, it's a way of showing your view. But the best way to show your view is not you just fancy staying at home in bed and couldn't be bothered to get up. You go to the polling station, write a rude message on the ballot paper, whatever you want to say about the candidates, but at least you've shown you care enough to take part, even if you don't want to vote for anybody.
Not sure you've convinced me. Anyway, you tell me your thoughts on all of this kind of Boris shenanigans, all that's going on at the moment.
Well, I mean, I think that Darren is absolutely right. That, I mean, treachery has a way of uniting the people who are betrayed. So, in a sense, the Tory party this afternoon came together once they'd seen what had happened.
What do you mean, the Christian Wakefield thing?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, the mere fact that he joined Labour. I do think that Boris is certainly nowhere near out of the woods yet, and everything now relates on timing. The danger of the 29 intake, who are very inexperienced MPs and are getting a bit overexcitable, the danger of them starting to put in letters now is they may go too quickly. If you want to get rid of the Prime Minister, the way to go and do it is to put the letters in after Sue Gray's report has come out, because if you put them in now and there is a vote of no confidence by the end of the week, and we still don't have the report, the parliamentary party has to vote to get rid of Boris Johnson by 50%. You won't get that figure. The letters won't do it. You need the MPs to vote against him. And under Tory rules, he can be in place for another year.
Unless they change those rules, which, of course, is something that they could do.
If they'd like to change the rules, they can do that too. As you say, politics is a grubby business.
It is. Claire, your thoughts?
Well, you know, some of what Nigel says is right. The 29 intake have become really overexcited. Now, they were elected towards the end of 2019, so haven't been in Parliament very long. And the majority of their time has been spent dealing with COVID, so they've been at home, they've been in their constituencies. They don't understand quite how party politics works within Westminster. Now, I know that you don't like all that party politics, but it is very, very important to get all of the intakes to know each other. We're a big party, we are a broad church, but if you don't learn how each one of you works, then it all falls to pieces. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing at the moment.
Sophie?
Yeah, I think you can tell the inexperience of the 2019 intake, you know, from a mile off. Even from their behaviour towards Boris at the beginning of the pandemic, a lot of them voted for Boris on pretty much all of his policies, even though a lot of them contradicted what people in their constituencies would have wanted. And now the tides are turning, they're also sort of going along with that part of the party. I think they're trying to stick to their careers. Their inexperience is showing through, their nervousness is showing through. None of them really have the balls to find a policy and you know, do what their heart says. They're trying to all stick together, and you can clearly tell that they're very, very inexperienced.
Nigel, so what do you think should happen? Do you think Boris should remain in post?
No. And I think this is the whole point about trying to move him. What he's proved to be is a useless Prime Minister and not a very adept politician either.
Hang on a second.
Yeah,
okay. I know, I can sense it on the surface across Britain.
So
people will be writing in, going, Nigel, hang on just a second. If you look at where we are in terms of COVID, just look at England just today. We'll come on to Plan B in a second. I think the wonderful it's wonderful the restrictions been lifting, but you've got the things like the vaccine successes. You've got where we are as a country. If you compare us to some of the ridiculous antics that are going on across European countries and beyond when it comes to COVID, we don't have any of that. Boris Johnson has played a big part in that. Lots of people will say they think that actually he got the ball rolling on Brexit, etc. So a lot of people would take issue with you saying he's not done anything at all.
No, OK, but it's things like, I would certainly give him credit for the vaccination programme. It has been absolutely magnificent, and certainly the NHS especially have to be thanked for the way that they rose to the challenge of doing that. But then you look back at the various things that Boris Johnson gets wrong, things that you can see coming. I don't blame him for mistakes that come out of left field, but things like Marcus Rashford had to demand free school meals back in the summer holidays, and it was a no-brainer. When he came up with that, you should have just said yes, it didn't cost very much money, children needed it. Boris Johnson tried to stop that going through and then had to U-turn. And the same thing applied at the end of last year. He tried to defend the indefensible with Owen Paterson and sleaze allegations, again, had to U-turn. And then we come down to the parties. And the issue about the parties, the biggest issue, is him not telling the truth about this. So do you want a Prime Minister who is not honest with the public?
Absolutely not. I would like, well, ideally, I wouldn't have liked us to be in the situation that we're in before with stupid rules, inhumane rules, many of them, but the rules that were allegedly broken were the socialising rules that most people were not following. And we found ourselves in this pathetic situation where we're sitting there trying to analyse if someone's inside, is it okay? And then if they're outside, is it not okay? If they're drinking alcohol, is it not okay? But if they're drinking tea or coffee during that meeting, is it more okay? And I just find it all just quite ridiculous when we've got so many other things that we should be focusing on.
It was confusing, mixed messaging, all the things that should have happened during the pandemic. Those are things that didn't. His great success certainly was the vaccine programme.
And Sophie, do you think Boris needs to go?
No, I think there's no point now. I mean, who's going to replace him? First of all, you're going to get somebody like Michael Gove, who wanted us to be subjected to even harsher lockdown restrictions. He's a massive benefit, him staying in number 10, because he's messed up so catastrophically that he has zero justification to ever bring in any more COVID measures again, which is brilliant for us because we can always leave normally. And I have a question for you. The attitude that you're taking with Boris, with his Christmas parties, etc., would you take the same attitude to Starmer? Would you like to see him go as well?
Well, if Keir Starmer had done the same thing and he was the Prime Minister, yes.
But
Keir Starmer isn't the Prime Minister.
Yes, but he also votes for those rules. He might not write those rules, but he votes for those rules.
But then I tend to be more in favour of rules about COVID than most people. So I think the Labour Party was absolutely right to back the government on the restrictions they brought in.
Yes, and then he broke those governments.
But you seem to be saying that because the Prime Minister has messed up so catastrophically, he should just stay anyway. I'm sorry, but I don't want my country run by somebody who comes up with a set of rules, speaks to the nation from the lectern at number 10 about said rules, and then can't remember what those rules are, didn't understand them, got confused, needed someone else to tell him what they were. That isn't how you govern a country. And unfortunately now what we're seeing is anything important policy-wise, like levelling up, like the fire safety bill, like the immigration bill, is either being rushed out, it is incomplete, it is slightly incoherent at times, and there is no thought. So the communications around everything, it is all such a shambles.
So what's the answer then? 'Cause it's easy to say what's wrong and it's easy to kind of pick obvious fault, but who do we go to then? What do we do next?
Well, I mean, I think that is largely the problem, and it's the problem that the Conservative Party has faced previously. And we are quite a brutal bunch if we think that somebody is past their sell-by date. We tend to try and dispatch them quite quickly. But we do now have to watch the timing on this. We are ahead of a set of local elections. We have all these policy pieces. So I am quite in favour of him looking at his position, but I don't think this needs to be an imminent decision. I think that there are a few more months ahead yet. And I don't think he can turn it around, but I think the party can start to coalesce behind somebody that could do a good job. Because at the moment, lots of names are out there, but there isn't one candidate that I would say, oh, yes, that's brilliant.
And
Nigel, we just don't know.
Nigel Nelson, how do you think that the media behaves through circumstances like this, situations like this?
Do you mean the parties?
No, I just mean what's happening at the moment, because what I've found is I should be riveted by all of the goings-on. I should be glued to newspapers like yours and various news websites. No, I'm not. I find them ridiculous, if I'm honest. I find the things that much of the media chooses to focus on, the wrong things. I feel that too many agendas are being served out. I feel that there's an immense amount of hypocrisy that goes on within the media, and I find it a turn off as opposed to a turn on.
OK, well, I mean, the first thing is that bear in mind that what we're actually doing is reporting what is going on. Yes, it's not done in a non-partisan way, that we do indeed have our own political agendas, each newspaper does. But essentially it is reporting the facts as they turn up. And when it comes down to the importance of it, it'll be interesting to see what viewers say about this. But one of the most important things, perhaps the most important thing, is getting the right government to lead the country and to govern it. Now, my view at the moment is we've got the wrong government. It doesn't work. Too many mistakes have been made, and as a result of that, parties, if you like, was the straw that finally broke the camel's back. And he is now, as Claire's just said, past his sell-by date, time to go.
See, I'm trying to, there's a real split response actually coming through. John, for example, is saying that the whole lot of them should be sacked. In fact, all parties, everyone, John just wants everyone to go, but I'm not sure who would be in charge.
I think he's got a point, though.
Do you?
I think
Tell me why.
Unless we're going to replace Boris with a backbencher or somebody from the COVID recovery group like Steve Baker, I don't believe, per se, that anything's going to change.
Really?
Because all of them collectively have been completely, in my view, incompetent.
Well, I think that's a really unfair criticism because there are a lot of them and you can't just say, oh, well, I think all of them are just as bad.
All of the ones that are genuinely put forward for the leadership contest, you get the same ones every time, your Liz Truss's, your Rishi Sunak.
But I think you'll see some different names coming up this time. I mean, the time before
but realistically,
2019.
what's the chances of them actually getting to the, the crux of the leadership election? Are we going to see the similar sorts of people? Are we going to see the likes of Dewbs?
I don't think you are. Just from what I hear around Westminster, there are some really interesting names that come up. Nadine Zahawi is one, for example. Penny Mordaunt is one. Tom Tugendhat. These are not the names that have come up previously, and they're not in in the sort of cabinet at the moment. They have experience.
He was responsible
well, yes,
for a lot
Nadine
of it.
is in, but he hasn't been tarred by that brush. He has worked really hard on the vaccine rollout scheme. He's now doing a good job at this parliament.
He's lied numerous amount of times. You saw him respond to Claire Fox saying, no, we're definitely not going to bring in vaccine passports. Next thing you do, they bring in vaccine passports. Again, he's got the same problem.
But I don't think that was, I think that's unfair to say
government.
that he lied when he was given a number 10 briefing. He would
categorically, it's
go
right
out.
in front of your face. No, we are not going to bring them in. Brings them in. It's dishonesty.
And Nigel, talk to me about this whole kind of defection, because again, this is one of the things. I do accept I might have got out of bed the wrong side today, but so there's a lot that's annoying me about all this situation. But one of the things that annoys me is this whole kind of situation where we've just spoken then, Christian Wakeford. He has defected from the Tories to Labour, and he's done so within the rules. This is the rules as they stand, that he doesn't have to have a by-election, there doesn't need to be a by-election. My problem has always been, I don't think that you should be able to defect from parties without there being a by-election.
I agree with you. I think that you actually have a moral duty to put yourself before the electorate if you're going to stand on a different manifesto from the one that you're elected on. So, yes, I would like to see him actually hold a by-election there. And it would be an interesting one. It would be a very good tester, a real test of where we are at the moment. He's in the 10th most marginal seat in the country. He's got a majority of just 400. It would be a fascinating by-election. But yes, I think he's got a moral duty to go and do that.
Do you know what I would find even more fascinating and slightly amusing is if he did follow his own desires, because don't forget, he voted this almost, if you like, on a private members' bill, didn't he? This is what he wanted to happen. So if he was indeed to follow his own desire and wishes, I would love, it would make me smile, if he didn't get the selection for the candidate in the Labour Party, because there's no guarantee, and correct me if I'm wrong, because you are indeed the expert, but there's no guarantee that if there was a by-election that he would automatically be selected as the Labour candidate. Am I right?
Yes, you are right, that it's down to the local Labour Party to make that decision. I'd be awfully surprised if they didn't choose their sitting MP, which is what he now is now.
Well, we shall see.
I just can't believe he's gone to Labour. I mean, to be honest with you, if you are a real Conservative, and this is what winds me up about the whole entire thing, if you are a real Conservative in blood and bones, you would not touch Labour with a 60-foot barge pole. They are categorically opposite to the Conservatives, effectively.
I think you're right, but a lot of those...
why has he gone over there? He's clearly done it for career purposes and career purposes only. And at that point, if you are willing to sacrifice every single one of your principles so significantly, you are not worthy of those green benches that you find yourself on.
I think a lot of those MPs who were elected, Tory MPs who were elected and would have previously been Labour seats, actually are not natural Tories. The ones that I've met could almost be on either party. So I don't think that that's true. I mean, I've not talked to him about this since he defected, so I don't know his views. But if he thinks he can represent his constituents better in the Labour Party, then it's perfectly reasonable for him to cross the floor and go to them. What I do think he should do is actually to represent this constituents, you ought to have an electoral mandate, and that means a by-election.
Because some of the biggest Conservative votes that we saw where Labour and the Conservatives were categorically split, the only time Labour actually decided that they were going to do their job and be in opposition were things like the £20 universal credit card, which he voted with the Conservatives on. So I can't see them, and I don't know why Keir Starmer, I think Keir Starmer's wrong for allowing him to come back into that party anyway, when clearly he has made decisions that Labour would always fundamentally disagree with.
Well, I have also, as I mentioned at the start of the show, I put a poll up on my Twitter earlier on asking, do you think Boris Johnson should stay or go? 71% of you think that he should stay. Of course, that means 29% think he should go. Do keep your thoughts coming in, GB Views at gbnews.uk, or tweet me at Michelle Dewbs or at GB News. Now we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk to you about something that has made me happy, because you've heard a lot there about everything that hasn't made me happy, but Plan B, COVID restrictions will be eased from next week. The bit that I'm most happy about, got to be honest, is that school kids will not be forced to wear masks in classrooms from tomorrow. Thank God for that. I'll see you in just a few minutes.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry. You guys have been getting in touch, lots of you, with your thoughts about the whole Boris thing. Pete says Boris has basically been done over by the civil servants who work in number 10, and Boris, instead of apportioning blame on them, has taken full responsibility. Some might challenge about how much responsibility is taken there, Pete. Darren says, I believe most people are believing in Boris as he is the only one driving forward, whilst the rest have no ideas other than to snipe and sneer. Albert says Boris should not resign. He should stay in charge of this great country. Martin says Boris is a bumbling idiot, but he's our bumbling idiot. What do you think to that? Anyway, let's move on. I want to talk to you about COVID, because Plan B COVID restrictions will be eased from next Thursday. The Prime Minister has announced in the Commons earlier today. He says that the Omicron wave seems to have peaked in England. In a press conference a little while ago also, Health Secretary Sajid Javid confirmed the easing of the restrictions.
I've always said that we would open up the country as soon as the data supports it. And earlier today, that's why we announced 3 important changes as part of our return to Plan A.
Well, let's look at those, shall we? Easing the restrictions will mean the following. Working from home guidance will end and people will no longer be asked to wear masks anywhere. Yippee! And the compulsory use of COVID passes at certain events will also end. Good. Although venues can still use them if they wish. And from tomorrow, face masks will no longer be required in any classrooms. I have to say that is the one that makes me the happiest. Anyway, people who test positive for COVID will still have to self-isolate, but Boris Johnson said there will soon be a time where it's not required. What do you reckon then? Are we heading towards a new normal? Maybe the old normal? Do you remember that? Do you reckon restrictions are being lifted too soon, or is it just time to kind of get on with things? Sophie?
Well, obviously this comes as a brilliant bit of happiness to me. I don't actually think I can stop smiling when I'm talking. It's about time. Obviously, you just said earlier, the one that makes me the happiest is the face masks in schools. There was zero evidence for those face masks to be in schools. There have been studies that show that because of the types of face masks that we, because I'm going to say we, because I was in schools when all of these policies were enacted, the face masks that we would have are not medical grade face masks, therefore they would make no difference to transmission. But what I found out when I was in the classroom, and most commentators have never been able to speak on this because they quite frankly didn't experience it, so you can hear it from me the first. There were teachers that were sitting there that would, be yelling at the poor year 7s about their face masks more than they would be teaching them. Those shy kids that would sit at the back of the class that would never speak, it was a massive barrier to them to impact their learning. They were already terrified, didn't want to speak out, and now they've got another barrier to engage in their learning. Communication problems were impossible. I'm going to be honest with you, most of the time when we were in school we took them off because we couldn't hear each other. He couldn't hear us, we couldn't hear them. You're in schools to learn, and the damage that they have done to my generation has been unbelievable. Like I sat there in August.
The damage what's done?
That they've done to the rest of our lives, to our education. I sat there in August and literally watched my future crumble in front of my eyes.
Tell me why?
Well, they cancelled my exams. So I got my exams cancelled once, went back and thought, no, you know what, this is not on. I'm not getting screwed over by the algorithm. I'm better than this. Got there, they cancelled them again, and I thought, nothing I can do anymore. So this makes me so angry. They literally ruined our lives. And nobody spoke about it at all. And the commentators, they had union reps come on and say, this is what the schools should have put in place, and they didn't care about what this did to us. And this is the first time I've ever spoken about it on TV because I knew that I'd cry about it, but I literally watched and felt like my entire life was falling apart because of what this government did to young people, and nobody cares. Not one person has cared about children in this pandemic. They think, why are we putting masks on them when people can go to football stadiums and they can go to theatres and play Nadeem Zahawi sitting there at the teaching awards with no mask, and yet we're disrespecting kids. This pandemic will finish. The damage this has done for us is forever, and we'll never get it back.
Nigel Nelson.
Well, I mean, I think Sophie said it all about the effect certainly on your generation about something like this. I mean, yes, eventually we do have to live with COVID. I do appreciate that, but I do think that Boris Johnson took a gamble with the health service by doing what he did. The gamble appears to have paid off. Had I been there, I wouldn't have taken the gamble. And so if the same set of facts were presented in front of me again and a variant like Omicron came along, I would have actually had stricter restrictions than Plan B.
Yeah, I mean, I disagree with stricter restrictions. I think we needed restrictions in the beginning, but it is heartbreaking listening to Sophie. I left school a long time ago, so it hasn't affected me. I had to homeschool my child, which was appalling. I'm not the world's greatest teacher, but the effect on children and young people's mental health throughout the pandemic is something which is going to come back and haunt us in the years to come. I'm pleased that we've removed restrictions. I really, really am, because we may now get to see some action being taken in mental health, some action being taken to reduce the waiting list for operations, especially cancer operations within the NHS. Because when you read these stories and you hear from people whose diagnoses have been delayed, their operations have been delayed, and that cannot be allowed to happen, that cannot continue. But Sophie, your future isn't ruined.
Well,
you must accept
the problem
this.
is that
a lot of support coming in for you, by the way.
We will never get this time back. And you can come here and say we're going to promise you catch-up funds and we're going to do this and we're going to help those kids that have fallen through the cracks. But people don't understand there's kids that haven't fallen through the cracks that are getting B's and C's, that could be getting A's and A stars, that will take them to Oxford. And for me, it's important because I went to one of the worst schools in the country for secondary school. I went to a state school. I'm not a private school girl. I never would be. And we just stood absolutely no chance.
And I appreciate that.
And there's nothing we could do.
And you know what?
People are saying that we appreciate that. We're human beings. We have lives, and we're going to have to experience the damage that we've done for the whole life.
Look at what you are currently doing now at your age. Sitting here
with
talking
us. Any better than this, Sophie, I can tell you. It's only downhill from there.
The resilience that this is going to teach you is way more important than some of the stuff that you'll ever learn in a classroom. I really believe that. And I speak as somebody that was state educated. I didn't go to university. I went out to work at 18. I am not, you know, a typical sort of Tory private school educated person. I really am not. And you know what? Resilience is one of the best things that will take you through your life.
But Sophie, I have to say, you are getting a huge amount of support coming through on the emails, etc. And I, share your frustration. I speak about this often. I wasn't aware of the stories that you were about to share, by the way, so this isn't set up in any way. I have always pretty much maintained that this whole, the masking of children and things like that, I found it so wrong. And I found this whole kind of conversation about COVID, the lack of kind of focus on the different risk factors and situations that people have. We've treated everyone the same, whether it's an 80-year-old with underlying health issues or a fit and healthy 18-year-old. Everyone's had to kind of almost go on the same treatment plan, for want of a better word. Everyone's been forced to live with restrictions. And the reality of it is, as we've seen, ONS figures came out. There was a Freedom of Information request that I'm sure many of you are familiar with by now. But the figure of people that actually died purely because of COVID was 17,000. And that, for me, is a figure that really, it really created a strong emotion in me, because what it made me realise, what it reinforced in me actually, was that the people most risk of COVID were people like the older people, the people with the underlying health conditions. And no, I'm not saying that I value those people's lives any less, but what I'm saying is we should have always had sensible conversations about the restrictions, etc., that we put into place, making sure that they were effective as opposed to this blanket catch-all. And one of the things that really irritated me again today, I told you this was going to be a happy topic, Nigel, but one of the things that really irritated me today, you saw Sajid Javid's press conference not that long ago, an hour or so ago. Of course, all the journalists can't help themselves questioning about Boris, but what they were also doing was asking, well, where's your evidence for removing some of these restrictions? What
got
science?
The evidence in front of them.
No, but my point is, Sophie, that all these people that are now querying, where's your evidence for removing these? Where's your evidence for lifting this? Why wasn't there questioning? I'm looking at you, Nigel, because you're a journalist. I am. I'm looking at you because you're a journalist. Why weren't people in the media questioning more? Where is your evidence for the stuff that you're enforcing on us? Where is the evidence that these things are going to make a difference? Why only now that there's some kind of random political capital to be gained? Why only now are some of these people, some of these journalists asking the questions that they should have been asking a long time ago?
Well, Michelle, we were asking those questions right from the very beginning of the pandemic.
That's not true.
Well, I mean, maybe we weren't getting answers,
I think
but we were asking the questions.
You've asked why, for the evidence of why they can't, and you've got the COVID evidence. You can see how COVID is growing. You can see that But you've never asked for how the
well, let him
restrictions
defend his corner then.
that.
Because you're saying that actually you disagree with what you're hearing, that the journalists have been doing those kind of things.
Yeah,
and...
I mean, right from the beginning, we start from square one, that nobody knew anything about this disease when it first happened. Not governments, not scientists, certainly not journalists. I spent most of 2020 talking to more scientists than I did politicians, trying to understand what was going on. We called into question when Boris locked down, was it too late? Did he raise those restrictions too early? We were asking questions about what was going on in schools, and I appreciate
But it felt to me, Nigel,
you actually suffered through it.
It felt to me that all these press conferences that we had, these 5 o'clock or whatever it was, I got the sense, and this is a perception, and I got the sense that the questions that were being asked was always, why aren't we going deeper? Why aren't we going harder? Why aren't we going faster? I never really felt that there was an equal sense of, well, hang on a second, is this the right thing? Should we be doing this? All of this stuff about the masks in classrooms, we've just found out now that they barely even made a difference. Why wasn't we told that? Why didn't that drive the policy decisions? And actually have not impacted people's lives en masse the way that they did. Claire, I'm conscious that you've not contributed much to this, and I'm interested on your thoughts.
I mean, it's a really tricky situation because what Nigel says is right. At the beginning, none of us knew what we were dealing with. And I watched pretty much every single press conference going because I work in Parliament. I also represent the people in my community. So I needed to understand what it was we were dealing with. And journalists were asking the questions. Sometimes they all veered towards the same question. It would just depend on what had happened. I questioned the data coming down from places like SAGE and the scientists. As you start to look at it, dying from COVID or dying with COVID in the hospital statistics, it was really weaselly worded. So there is a lot of fault here. I'm really pleased that we've lifted restrictions. I'm a little bit concerned that people will be rushing back to the office and we'll go back to that horrible situation of anybody with a cold and a cough just comes into the office when they're ill. Because I think, we've kind of got rid of that at the moment. So if we don't have masks, I would really rather people stayed at home if they're all snotty and horrible.
But I think working at home's an elite thing. It's for the middle class, elite people at the civil service. They can all work from home. People like me weren't allowed to go to school, but I was allowed to work in KFC during the pandemic, so I couldn't go to school, but I could go and fry some chicken.
But I think that the whole working from home thing, I don't think it is elitist because now it is going to be up to individual companies to decide what their policy is. Lots of businesses have decided that flexibility is working for their employees with a better home-life balance. But also for their business, the productivity is higher because people are happier. So no, I don't think it's an elitist issue. I'm not saying you have to work from home. If you want to go into the office, you will be able to go into your office. But you are going to have to stop thinking it's an elite problem.
You would scrap that we advise you to work from home if you can. You say businesses, get your employees back in, but if it's beneficial to you, do what you want.
But it is being scrapped. That's the whole point.
But you just said that you don't...
But I think businesses now have changed. I think the working world has changed. I think people's attitudes have changed to it. So the guidance is being removed. Government is doing exactly what you want it to do.
So it's the right thing to do, right?
But I wasn't arguing that it wasn't. I was saying that there is flexibility now.
We've got a consensus. I think that we both, me included three, I think that we pretty much all agree that it was the right thing to do. I do just want to make a little point. I'm going off topic, if I may. Because I'm looking at all of the emails when I am paying attention to everything everyone says, but I look at Twitter, I look at emails, etc. I am what I would like to think on the show, a bit of a multitasker. And one of the things that I notice is when I ask for your thoughts, etc., is sometimes the kind of venom that comes through when you're articulating that you disagree with a panel member or indeed me. And I just think, we've all had such an awful time of it over these last couple of years. And no matter what side of the political kind of argument or fence or anything that it is that you sit on, I do think we've all got to make a bit more of an effort to just be a little bit kind of nicer and kinder to each other. We have to kind of, who knows what's right and who knows what's wrong and who knows, we all have our individual views. And I alluded, by the way, to two people that were married. Obviously, it's Nigel and Claire. You guys are polar opposites, really, politically, different sides of the fence when it comes to Brexit and Remain. Yet you're married, you're able to get along, and this is exactly how it should be. Different opinions should be absolutely fine. And I do think we all kind of need to be mindful. You probably know who you are if you've emailed in using quite obscene language and just being quite nasty. It's not necessary. Why don't you just say that you disagree with an opinion and state your reasons why instead of being insulting? If we all could manage to do that, the world, I promise you, would be a much nicer place. Anyway, we're almost at the end of the show and I want to talk about inflation. So I'm going to try and squeeze it in, end on that topic, shall we? Because it is another headache for Boris Johnson. Today it's been revealed that the UK inflation has jumped to a nearly 30-year high of 5.4%, which means that the cost of the living crisis is deepening. Food prices, furniture, clothing, housing costs, they all rose last month, and shortages of staff pushed up wage costs, and hold-ups at UK ports have increased the cost of imports. That's all, of course, before a likely energy price cap hike in the spring. These rises are going to put more pressure on the Bank of England to raise interest rates again next month. So what do you reckon? Should the government step in and try and tackle some of this? And what can the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, and the other government ministers do? Claire?
I don't think this is solely a government problem. Rising food costs, for example, is a global issue. Inflation is also a global issue. It's not something necessarily for the government to step in and bail out. I think you run the risk of coming too much of a nanny state and too much in control of that. However, government can work with energy companies, for example, to work on the price cap, properly work on the price cap, not just accept what the big six say is acceptable to them. It makes you extremely angry when you see the vast profits and bonuses that are going to those top chief executives in those companies when you have people in the United Kingdom who have to choose between heating and eating. Now, that isn't right. I do think at the moment this is a perfect storm of problems, but as restrictions are eased and life goes back to a version of normal, then things will settle down. People will spend more on things like entertainment, they will spend more on travel, and the economy will start to balance up again. And the delays at ports will ease, and I don't think that that is a Brexit issue at all, which Nigel will probably disagree with me.
You two have been excellent. Disagreeing that much, Nigel.
The dining table.
Very briefly, your thoughts. We've only got about 2 minutes left on programme, so your thoughts on this?
OK, well, I mean, Claire's right, it's a global problem. Central banks have been pumping in money to deal with the pandemic. And as those of us who can remember our school days, obviously mine are further behind than anybody else around this table. But inflation is too much money chasing too few goods. So you've had supply issues as well, which you've seen with empty supermarket shelves. That pushes prices up. My prediction will be that next year, inflation will be back down to a manageable level.
Sophie?
I think, yeah, I agree with them. It's a global problem. We're seeing the same problem in the likes of the United States. I don't think you can say that this is particularly a political problem because obviously the strategies that Boris are using and Biden are using are completely different, but they both have the same issue. So I think it's, just because of the scenarios that we find ourselves in.
Well, there you go. Your emails have been flying in tonight. Sophie, I've got to say, lots of love for you and your experiences. Declan says, well said. Sophie, these kids can never get that time back. It's their most important time, but they do have a future time that can be as wonderful and as exciting as any time there has ever been. The future of this country is in the hands of people like Sophie. And I want to end with a little top tip from each of you. How do you, when you're in such a difference of opinions or different sides of the political divide, give me a top tip from each of you. How can you kind of stay happy, stay friendly, even though you might disagree on things?
You have to listen to each other, but you also have to know when to make somebody laugh. It tends to just remove the stress.
And remember to make them laugh. Your top tips, Nigel?
And learn from it. So I've learned things from Claire when I've disagreed with her. and the big trick is not falling out.
There you go. Well, that's pretty much all I've got time for. I will give you the results of my poll, though, that I was running. I asked you, I'm interested to know, do you want Boris Johnson to stay or to go? Over 10,000 of you have interacted with that poll. The answer is obviously stay. I say obviously because it's still over 70% of you that want that outcome. There you go. Anyway, that is all I've got time for. Thank you very much for your company tonight. And thank you also to my panel. I've enjoyed it. I will be back at exactly the same time again tomorrow, 6 o'clock until 7 o'clock. You have yourselves a very good evening in the meantime.
Hello again. Skies have cleared widely across the UK, and that means overnight a widespread frost, and there'll be some wintry flurries in some spots, mainly for the north of Scotland because of the Arctic wind that has arrived now behind this cold front. That cold front cleared the cloud and some outbreaks of rain earlier in the day, and now we've got clearer but colder weather across all parts. And under those widely clear skies, temperatures will rapidly fall overnight. We'll keep a bit more of a wind in the far north and east, and that wind will drive further wintry flurries into the north of Scotland and for parts of eastern England as well. But where we've got clear skies elsewhere, a widespread